Hello everyone, it's time for another one-day make, and today I'm going to be attempting to make a velvet bonnet in one day. We're going to be revisiting the 1850s to try and accessorize my upcoming new outfit. I'll be using a teal velvet in my stash that I got from one of the Simple Things dumpster dives, and a pink faux silk lining that I think is going to set off the teal nicely. So let's get started and see if we can get this done in one day. First, let's take a look at the materials I'll be using. I have some medium weight buckram that I picked up at Joann's. It's hidden in their utility fabric section with the awning and ticking fabrics. Some pink felt for mulling, some bright pink poly satin lining, and a roll of 12 gauge jewelry wire. Before I could start sewing my bonnet, I had to figure out my pattern. I used this kitchen doohickey to make a circle for the back of the bonnet. Then I eyeballed the rest of the pattern based off some examples I found on Pinterest. I could pretend that there was a method with lots of measuring and accuracy involved, but there absolutely was not. Okay, so this is the initial test. So, let's see here. I feel like these parts need to come forward a little bit, so I'm just going to lengthen this line right here. Make that a little bit longer to bring these forward, because these should be like right here on the face. Okay, this one I made sort of intentionally enormous just to see, so I can cut it down instead of having to make something entirely new. That's like Handmaid's Tale level of gigantic. I think those alterations will get me where I want to go. I guess it's time to draw a version number 3 and see if we can get it to sit just a little bit better. You know? I think we've done it. I think this is it. Using my new bonnet pattern, I cut all the pieces out of the buckram. In hindsight, I should have used a double layer since I was only working with medium weight buckram, but I'll know better for next time. I shaped the jewelry wire to conform to the edges of the bonnet. Beware of kitty paws. I then carefully stitched the wire to the edges of the buckram using a very wide zigzag stitch. I then hand stitched the bonnet together using quick and dirty whip stitches. I was going to add bias tape around the edges and back here at this seam so it would smooth out all of these kind of funky edges, but I can't seem to find any bias tape, and I don't have a car today, so I can't go out to the store and get some. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some strips of felt and just sew those down. Hopefully that'll give me a bit of a smoother line over those wired edges so that they don't stick out through the fashion fabric. The felt binding was sewn down over the front edge and over the back seam with a running stitch. Then the felt layer was added on top of the bonnet, which is called mulling. I used a whip stitch to attach the felt to all the outer edges. The bonnet lining started with a simple length of the pink satin, 9 inches wide by 44 inches long. I wanted a fancy ruched lining, so I ran 2 lines of gathering stitches, which I used to draw the length of the fabric. And then I realized it would need at least 2 more rows of stitching to get it to lay right, so I added those a ½ inch from each outer edge. Then I wrestled the lining into place. I stitched the lining down through all layers along the gathering lines so it would stay in place. Because the bonnet was so thick at this point, I used binder clips to keep the velvet in place while I sewed it down. I used a whip stitch to sew on the fashion fabric. I wasn't worried about the stitches showing because I figured they would blend into the pile of the velvet. Well, it is midnight. I have to work tomorrow, but I am so close to finishing. I literally just have to stitch on the rest of this in the back and I'll be done. So I'm gonna push through and finish this right quick, and then I am going to collapse. So some final thoughts on the bonnet. I'm overall pretty pleased with it, but there are a couple of things I would do differently next time. I would not use that aluminum wire that I bought. It's pretty susceptible to moving out of shape and bending whenever you touch it. So the bonnet doesn't really hold its shape very well. So if I could get my hands on millinery wire, I would use that. Otherwise, I'm not sure what a good alternative would be. Maybe some steel wire instead that's gonna be a little more hardy. I kind of shot myself in the foot time-wise because I made that ruched lining for the bonnet. If you wanted to just do a plain lining, you could definitely get this done a lot faster, but I really like the way it looks and I've always wanted a bonnet with the ruched lining, so I figured why not. The felt worked really well in place of bias tape when I was covering up the places where the wiring might show through, and then the felt itself just worked really nicely to give the bonnet a smooth finished look. I'm not so sure I would make a velvet bonnet again. It's quite bulky and I think it's going to be rather warm, which if I lived in a colder climate would be great, but I live in Texas and it's 97 degrees like most of the time. For a quick project, I think this went together really well and I'm looking forward to making more quick bonnets in the future. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this little sewing adventure, be sure to hit that like button below. And if you want to see more one-day makes and sewing adventures in the future, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time. Bye! This ladybug just flew right into my face.